What is depression? Well, according to Google, depression is feelings of severe despondency and dejection. Whenever it comes to depression, there seems to be two main forms that we can categorize it in. And that's important because the category that your depression might be in can tell you how you should approach it. So the first is something called dysfunctional depression. This is when everything on the outside should indicate happiness. However, on the inside, you feel the common symptoms of depression, things like loss of interest in things that you once enjoyed, irregularities in sleeping, being tired without energy, and trouble concentrating. However, there is another type of depression, one called functional depression, and this is when you're experiencing a low in your life due to environmental causes. So, what is so special about something called functional depression? Well, unlike dysfunctional depression, which is usually approached with medicine or therapy, functional depression, you can actually control it by changing your environment. Now, in my life, I'd say there are two times that I had depression, and both were functional, meaning that they had a reason. Number one was in early high school, and this was more just social anxiety that presented itself in the symptoms of depression, so I'm not gonna really count it. Everyone has social anxiety at some point, and I should have had the symptoms of depression because I really sucked at having conversations with other people. Eventually, throughout high school, I worked on it, my confidence improved, and the symptoms seemingly went away. The second time in my life that I'd say I'd had depression was my very first semester of college. Now let me get down to it. I had no friends. I did not love what I was learning. I was in my dorm room when I wasn't in class. My diet and exercise sucked, and to an outsider, there's no wonder my brain was like, dude, there's something wrong here. And at this point in the video, I want to say, sure, I felt lonely before and I felt useless, but I've never had dysfunctional depression or been medicated for it. So it's important to say that I can't speak for those who have, and I hope that one day we find a better treatment for it. This video though, and the following advice that I'm going to give is specifically for people who have a form of depression that can be relieved by their own actions. The issue with this though, is that you don't know if certain actions will actually help you until after you've performed them. So let's move on to an analogy that helps describe what functional depression is. Imagine this. You touch a hot stove, and then it really hurts, right? So you lift your hand up. Imagine what would happen if your brain didn't process and it didn't feel the pain of the burn. You just left your hand there because you didn't know that it was painful. And so what happens? Your hand just starts to melt into this mashed potato lump of flesh. That's not really good for future you who maybe wants to doodle or hold things. Well, it's the same with depression. Most of it is functional, which basically just means that you're sitting in your chair all day long, or maybe you don't have any friends, or because you're drinking every night, or doing a ton of drugs that mess with your brain chemistry in a negative way. Or maybe it's simply because you're not doing what you love. It is your brain saying, the stove is hot, do something to change it. So for example, when I was in college, I got depressed because I was in my room for 16 hours a day doing homework. I didn't have any friends, and I was studying something that I wasn't passionate about. So it's no wonder that I got depressed. Eventually, I dropped out, and guess what? The day that I came back home was the happiest I had been all semester. Now, I'm not saying depression has something to do with what's going on in your life. But if you have depression, there's probably a high chance that if you fixed something in your life for the better, you would probably also feel better. Now, the psychology behind this is that according to evolutionary psychology, almost everything that happens to us has a reason, including depression. Psychologists surmise that one function of depression is to allow you to think about your situation and possibly find a solution to improve it. There's another theory that suggests that our current environment is changing so rapidly that our 1,000-year-old bodies can adapt to the new technology. For example, people are indoors and receiving way less sunlight than they used to. They breathe in much more harmful chemicals on a daily basis. In general, they live more sedentary lives, and certainly, social media apps are changing the baselines of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. So, for example, if you get dumped by some girl that you really liked, you probably should be depressed for a short period of time. Your environment is going to drastically change for the negative, and your brain wants to consciously figure out what caused that negative shift. Were you too clingy or controlling, or did you let yourself go? Did you just stop doing the things that made her smile? Your brain is trying to figure out what caused that negative emotional shift, but it's simply not as easy as figuring out that your hand hurts because your hand is on the stove. This causes a lot of problems and is why depression is very difficult to figure out. As another example, if you lose $1 million in the stock market, you should also be depressed. The normal response to that would be to feel a little down, to process those depression symptoms for a few days or maybe weeks, and then come to an understanding of how you actually made that decision to lose that much money. So without further ado, here is a list of things that you should, quote, fix to give yourself a fighting chance. Now, it might be worth noting that in my life, when I look at the best, the happiest, and the most joyful memories, all of these things are present. I also want to note that this isn't like a put a magic crystal next to your bed and you'll wake up with more electrons in your body and that'll translate to higher energy levels and it'll raise your chakras, and this isn't like that. These are mostly things that have actual studies backing them. So number 1, get on a regular sleep schedule. Now this one is first because it's the most important. Wake up and go to sleep within 30 minutes of the same time every day. And also, try to make sure you get at least 7 hours of quality sleep. Usually, fixing these two things helps most people. And if you can't sleep 7 hours a night, you might have something called insomnia, in which case you're fighting a double whammy, depression and insomnia, and you should definitely reach out to a professional. Number 2, start a routine. Now, it doesn't have to be super complicated. Just try to have a morning routine or have something you can rely on. We all need a balance of chaos and order, and right now, you probably have too much chaos. See, in our lives, when we have too much order, life starts to get boring. However, when there's too much chaos, you start to have anxiety. Try to give your life some order and set up a routine. Number 3, go to the gym. If you can add the gym to your routine, you can knock out 2 for 1, even if it's just the elliptical for 15 minutes or 20 stinking push-ups. It doesn't have to be that hard. But if you only knew what it did for your brain and body, you would start going. Number 4, get on a healthier diet. This one's pretty simple. No caffeine after noon. Less processed foods, and keto if you can. Heck, try a 24-hour fast every now and then. I might go more in depth on what a healthy diet for your brain is later, but let's move on to number 5. Number 5 is pretty simple. Stop taking illegal drugs. This includes alcohol, even though it's not illegal. Alcohol completely ruins your sleep, and it greatly diminishes your decision-making capabilities. In most cases, drugs do crazy things to our brain chemistry, some irreversible. So do yourself a favor and cut back, if not stop. Most drugs are correlated with depression too, so that should be one big red flag. Number 6 is to expose yourself to something new. Do something creative, or learn a new skill, listen to new music, take a course, order something new at your favorite restaurant, or travel to some unexplored places near you. Just exposing yourself to something new has been found to help with functional depression. Number 7 is to set a small goal and then try to achieve it. You can try to do 5 push-ups a day for a week. Or you can try to talk to 3 strangers a day for a week. Eat less than 50 carbs per day for a week. Try to keep it simple, and your whole perspective of life will change. Now, this also helps with motivation. Sometimes you just need some natural dopamine from actually achieving a goal that you set. The trick here is to make it a small, achievable goal. Number 8 is to listen to some more upbeat music. Seriously though, if the prime words in your choice of music right now are pain, suffering, or alone, and other negative words like that, what are you expecting your brain to do with it? Start to listen to inspiring music. There are literally thousands of motivational speeches on YouTube. You should try one of those next time. Listen to music that talks about how you want to feel, not how you're currently feeling. Last on our list is to think positive. Now I know this one is pretty difficult for a lot of people. They say 93% of your thoughts are thoughts that you had yesterday. The trick here is to stop a form of negative thinking called rumination. So this is pretty interesting, and I first heard about rumination in Martin Seligman's book, Learned Optimism, in which he talks quite a bit about depression. Rumination is the act of thinking about a thought that has a negative emotion over and over and over again. The author says this is one of the main causes and symptoms of depression in most people. Now, a simple trick I've learned to stop ruminating is to start meditating. In short, meditation is just not thinking. And if you do think about something, which you will, you say, "Oh, that thought popped into my head. I understand that it's most likely an automatic thought. Let's let it pass and see what comes on next." And then you try to think about nothing until the next thought pops into your head. Now this seems to build up the ability to let your thoughts pass without affecting your emotional state. And it's very powerful when it comes to ruminating. Are you ruminating on a daily basis? I highly suggest to try meditation, even if it's just 120 seconds in the morning. You are essentially building the bicep of your brain, or training your emotional regulation muscle. Also, as a little bonus tip here, I'm going to suggest to journal. This allows you to track your days, including your emotions and feelings. Even if it's just as simple as writing down the after version of a to-do list, which is like a done list, what it does is it gives you a clearer version of what happened in the past week or past month. Because if there's one thing I've learned about studying memory in the past few months, it's that humans have horrible memory when it comes to remembering what actually happened without biases or misperceptions. So writing down what happens in the day that it actually happened helps keep your mental timeline concrete and prevents time from corrupting your idea of the past. So maybe you want some proof that some of these things work. Well, let's say if I wanted to make a depressed person, here's what I would do. I would take everything I just recommended you to do, and then I would have them do the opposite. I would give them less than 5 hours of sleep a night, and I would change when they go to bed every day. Then I'd take their routine and just throw it out the window. If they have a job, I would fire them, because jobs are usually the best form of routine for most people. Then I would get rid of their daily walks. I'd keep them inside for most of the day, and probably include lots of laying in bed just watching Netflix. Next, I'd give them a crappy diet. I'm talking like fast food 3 times a day with sugary drinks and fat cakes for snacks. Then I'd add in alcoholism and maybe a few pain pills here and there, and especially some illegal stimulants. And if that isn't enough, I'd let them listen to depressed, sad music for maybe 4 hours a day. So much so that they can eventually start to sing along. And if they're not diagnosed with chronic depression yet, then all I'd have to do is surround them with a bunch of friends with the same habits. Do you think someone like this would get depressed? I guarantee that they would. This is actually called the inverse rule, and it's a secret decision-making heuristic that I like to use pretty often. So if you're feeling like the person that I just described, you probably need to seek out professional help, because it is very difficult to change many of these things at once by yourself. So ending this video, I'd like to leave you with a quote to think on. Viktor Frankl once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are then challenged to change ourselves." Also, I want to let you know that my goal with this video was to give you some actionable, some practical advice and ideas and things that you can change in your own life that might help you relieve some symptoms of depression. I want to make it clear, again, that this is specifically for functional depression, and there seems to be no way of telling the difference between functional depression and dysfunctional depression until you follow almost all these things. And if you do all these things and you're still depressed, or maybe you watch this list and you think to yourself, those won't help, or I'm not actually going to do those, then you probably should reach out to a professional who has the skills and tools to properly help. Thank you guys so much for watching. You should leave a comment below on what you thought of this video. I'll see you in the next one.